Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Just quick update on my wall here, the strawberry wall. None of them are dying. Now they're not really looking like they any different than they don't look real vibrant or nothing yet. But I think they're still getting over the initial shock. You have a few little dead leaves in here, but some of that was from before anyway. I didn't clean them all out, but so I think this is doing good, and plus it's doing the shading great, and I have all the bok choy and lettuce back here growing. Now the all the celery that I put in here, none of it germinated yet, so I'm gonna leave them in here and just see what happens. They might be harder to germinate, might take longer to germinate, I don't know. But the bok choy is looking really good, and the lettuce, all that's coming up looking really well. It's all small, you know, but it's all coming up. So and I know once it gets going, it goes pretty quick. So because I've grew lettuce in the past, but I would go buy lettuce from a nursery that was already started, and when I put them in here, I tell you what, it'd only take 2 weeks, and it was a full head of lettuce, and it would grow a lot, or maybe 3 weeks. I can't remember, somewhere from 2 to 3 weeks. So I know that it's got to get started. You know, starting from seed is going to take a little longer. I understand that. Okay, what I want to talk to you today about, I just kind of talk to you about it. Oh, I just want to let you know. I was thinking about the whole time when I was working on this wall. I was thinking about, well, how are my strawberries going to reproduce, and not strawberries, but reproduce more plants? Because if any of y'all grow strawberries, they have this little, like a cord that goes, like an umbilical cord that kind of stretches out, goes into the ground, and plants new plants. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to dedicate this bed right here for that. So I had taken, I think, 6 strawberry plants, and put them in here. And so these I'm going to allow to reproduce, and then when I need more strawberries in the wall, I can transplant them to the wall. So that's going to be that's I think I got that covered pretty good. So what I want to talk to you today about is the elevated beds. Now, some of you, if you've been following me, you know that that's what I have here. I have elevated beds. If you can see, they're up on cinder blocks. And the reason for that, now, I didn't know anything about elevated beds or nothing, but my backyard, majority of it is concrete. I used to have a business, and we drove forklifts back here. So as you can see, we're walking on concrete. Concrete's fills all of that whole area, even all of this. So the only thing that's not concrete is a little area of the yard here, and I can only grow in half of that because the other half gets shaded too early in the day because of the house. And so I have this bed here, I have my asparagus bed, and I have this little section here, which is only, like, if I remember right, it's 18 by 7. 18 by 7. That's all that area is right there. Oh, I'm sorry. 18 by 7. And so I have a grow bed back here, here, well, elevated beds, and I got one back there, and I'm fixing to eliminate that one. So I'm only going to be down to 4 elevated beds, and really, it's really all I need. Now, this year, I planted my tomatoes in the ground. Okay, usually I put them in one of the beds, and because of all the rain I've experienced, of course you know that if you have a lot of rain with tomatoes, what happens? Your tomatoes do what? They start to split. I've never had that happen before to me because I've always been growing in elevated beds, so I didn't even realize that. I would hear people talk about it, and it didn't dawn on me that the reason mine wasn't doing that was because they were in an elevated bed. It just, you know, I'm slower than a lot of people, sorry, but I wasn't getting it that that was why it wasn't happening to me, you know. And excuse me. And I finally realized why it's happening this year, because they're in the ground. Even though they're in a raised bed, they're still in the ground. And raised beds are good, you know, because just like in the old, you know, when people used to farm, they make the hill. That's so the plants would be in there, and the water can run out, and it wouldn't, you know, sit in there, but it could get out. Well, the problem is though, if it keeps on raining, well, the whole ground gets saturated underneath the hill, and then it just starts keeping the whole hill wet and damp. Well, that's what happens with raised beds. The same things happen, and now you want them damp, but sometimes we go through these seasons where things really stay soaked, and so that's what was happening with my tomatoes. then I hear people talking about they didn't do good with their peppers because of all the rain. And I've always had a great harvest of peppers. Now my peppers don't look that good right now because usually they're still growing at this point. Now I'm in a 9B zone, very hot, and you know, where some of y'all are just getting y'all stuff planted for the summer. I've already pulled out cucumbers and replanting cucumbers already, because we have an early season and it goes late, so we could do a lot. Never had no problems with the cucumbers, but we had so many cucumbers we were sick of them. But I planted 4 more new plants, and okay. So anyway, so my peppers now, about right now is when they really start to grow, and that's what I'm noticing. They're starting to grow. They're starting now really to get some height to them, and I've stuck them inside these things this year. I usually just put some stakes and tie them up, but I put them in here this year, and they're starting to grow. They're starting to grow, and usually in the middle of the summer I start having all kind of peppers. See, here's a couple of peppers. Here's some cayenne. They're green. If you look through there, you'll see some red cayennes. There's a little jalapeno. I planted some new jalapenos. I did some succession planting. I got some smaller jalapenos going on through there. Okay, so I usually do good with my peppers, and now I understand the reason why is because with an elevated bed, it never holds water. It drains water all the time. The water drains out. Now, yeah, you got to keep up with it and water it more than you would water a garden that's in the ground, because I don't even water my gardens out there, but I have to water my elevated beds. So that's one of the benefits to having a raised bed. The second benefit is as you get older, you're not bending over, so it's easier to weed, and that's the third benefit of it. The weeds are very minimal. You still get them because birds drop stuff in here all the time. The wind blows things. I got bees. They bring in pollen from everything, so I do get stuff. I got to keep them cleaned up, but it's so much easier to fool with, you guys, because it's basically waist high. And now I guess the downfall to it is that they're really pretty much kind of expensive to build. Now, unless you do like I do, I haven't paid a dime for any of the wood, even the cinder blocks, because I'm always picking stuff up. I'm always checking Craigslist. People tearing up a deck, I usually go by and get wood. Cinder blocks I pick up for free on Craigslist. So I did that years ago and got me enough. Cinder blocks where I did all that. Just recently, I made this. which I'm going to try to finish up this week. And that's all blocks that I had for free. I had them in the back on my compost pile, but I'm just going to use pallets around the compost pile. And that's another thing that's free. So I try to pick up as much free material as possible. See, I got all this lumber right here. This is all lumber. Not all, I mean, all of it came, all the wood, not the metal, all the wood came from a deck that somebody paid me to tear down. And all this wood was good, so that's what I'm using for my pig pen. And so I didn't pay a dime. Actually, I got paid to tear down the deck, and I got all that wood out of it. And I could have got more wood out of it, but you know, I don't have a lot of place to keep stuff. That's in the way right now. I got to get moving on things, because that's stopping me from getting to my beehive, and it's just, well, okay, that's not what this is about. This is all about elevated beds versus raised beds, okay? I recommend both. Raised beds, you can put a lot in them. The elevated beds, you can put a lot in them. The elevated beds, though, you have to really watch it and keep them moist, okay? You have to do that on a daily basis, okay? Especially if it gets hot. Now, when it rains, I don't have to worry about it, about watering them, but we get days where it doesn't rain. In my zone here, 9B, it gets extremely hot, and the ground dries out in these elevated beds very quick, and I have to keep them watered. But I'm okay with that, because I always have great success with anything I grow in the elevated beds. I really have no complaints about it at all. I didn't even, you know, I know it's pretty logical to say they're elevated beds, but when I first started really getting into this, after I concreted my backyard, I had to get raised beds. And when I heard raised beds, this is what I thought of, and the only reason I thought of it because I had all this concrete. And you know, I kind of started getting into this before they had YouTube. Oh, they had YouTube, but I didn't know about, you know, going to search YouTube to find out. I didn't know about all that at this time. And so anyway, so I built these boxes, and now since then, my first boxes I built, these are my second boxes, okay? These are made out of 2x8, I believe. Okay, my first boxes I made was made out of fence boards. Yeah. A lot of people cut big sections of fence out, throw them out when they're replacing the fence, and I had all this. I also had, because of my greenhouse is taking up some space, I did have I think one more raised bed in here, and it was all with fence boards. Well, those lasted. Now that was somebody throwing those out, and those lasted me 8 years. So when I built these, what I did was, let's see, if I can't show you the inside, but I can show you out here. So here's the joint. Here's a 2x8. Here's a 2x8. Here's a joint. So what I did on the bottom is I put some visqueen, some plastic, and I stapled it up to this high, to that joint. So if we get rain every day for weeks, well, it'll fill the bottom of this up, and it'll start pouring out those joints. I watch it. It pours out the joints, and therefore it leaves some water in the bottom to wick. So a lot of times I'll water my bed till I start seeing the water start pouring out of the joints, and then I know that it's filled up at the bottom. So that's something I figured out when I did these, and so it kind of helps with keep the water. But at the same time, you guys, through time, I see water dripping out of the bottom of this one. These beds are probably in the area of about, let me figure out how old we are in 2000. So these are probably close to 8 years right now. Okay. And I'm gonna have to do some work. Here's one here that's rotted on the top. This is a whole rotted board right here. I'm going to be needing to change that one. So this fall I'm changing it. And so anyway, you ought to consider elevated beds, getting them off the ground, especially if you're getting older. It's getting, you know, especially in the middle of the summer when it's really hot. Coming out to weed is the last thing you want to do, and it makes life really easy. The elevated bed. So I suggest to try it. At least build one and try it. If you're not somebody that goes out and collects material, well, you're going to have to go purchase material. Now, mine are done with 2x8s. This is one I picked up from a person down the street. They were doing like hydroponics and they quit doing it. So that's a 2x12 at the bottom. And so what I did, I just added a 2x6 on top. And so I did the same thing. I put a lining in there, in the bottom of that. And so I think putting the lining in there helps out a whole lot. And it even I'm hoping that's even helping protect the wood from rotting out. Now when I changed out those fence boards, the bottoms were still in good shape. I couldn't believe it. After 8 years, these were old fence boards that somebody threw out, and I had them for 8 years, and it was the sides that were rotting out where the mud was making contact, not the water. It's where the mud stayed up against it. That's like what's happening here on this one here. It's the top one where the mud stays on it. For some reason that rotted. And I don't have anything else rotten on me. Okay, but I suggest you try elevated beds. And of course raised beds. Okay, the raised beds, you can fit a lot in it. And it does lift it up higher. Now what I started doing is I started to, as you can see on this one, see how I added a 2x4 on it? Yeah. So I think this next year I'm gonna pull that 2x4 off and put me a 2x6 and raise it higher, and maybe on this one here add 2x4s and just start making them a little higher. Because I'm getting older, so I'm making them higher. But the problem is I get wood chips and I fill in my yard, and now my ground gets built up. So it's almost like, I need to quit building up my yard, but I like having the wood chips on the yard to keep all of that down. See all that grass? Yeah. So, but I'm okay with the grass now. I've been cutting the grass and raking it up and giving it to the chickens, because I can't free range my chickens, and they eat the grass. So I'm glad. That's like giving them some grass to eat. I do dig in the compost pile when I see a bunch of worms. I'll get a bunch of compost and throw that in there and let them scratch through it and eat the bugs and the worms, and there's roaches in it and all kind of other little crawly things that's in them, and I'll let them eat the bugs. So I do that with my chickens because I don't have a yard to free range them. And so anyway, elevated versus raised beds. I recommend both, and I highly recommend you try the elevated beds. I think you're going to like it. Okay, elevated beds will work good with your tomatoes. And you say, man, the tomatoes, but they're going to get high. Well, they do. And yeah, I have to get me a ladder out here and get them. But I'd rather do that than have to deal with the weeds, number one, bending over, number two, and number three, having split tomatoes because we're having a lot of rain. So I did that this year. I'm not ever planting them in there again. I'm going back to the raised beds. And actually, we personally like the little cherry tomatoes. For my family, I did the cherry tomatoes and I did the big tomatoes, and we had so many tomatoes. I don't need all that. I can use the space for something else. So I'm going to be putting my cherry tomatoes back in one of my beds, and all I do is I just go down one side with it. I put a wire right here, and I just plant me like about six plants right there, maybe four plants, 4 or 6 plants right here, and I tie them off to the rope. I mean to the wire, and yeah, they grow tall, and they get over the top of the wire, and they start coming over, and that's what I'm going back to that next year on the elevated beds. So I don't have to worry about, because even my little cherry tomatoes were split. And I never had that ever happen before. So I got to stop that from happening. So I'm going back to the elevated beds. Okay. Squash did good in the raised beds. They're also doing good in the elevated beds. Here's a squash right here. I've got several squash off of it already. Got more flowers on it right now. You can see through there. And even some fruit growing in there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's like 5 squash taking off right now in there. So they do good in there too. So elevated beds, I like them a lot. I'm glad I discovered it. And it was by accident. Probably, if I wouldn't have had concrete in my backyard, it's a possibility that I would have never experienced it. Now, something I'm wanting to do, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it, and I might do it over there in that area. I was going to do it in this area here. I was going to make a raised bed on top of this, my driveway here. I was going to make it like a 16 by 4 foot bed right here that I was going to bring up 3 feet high, fill it in, and use it for potatoes. And but since that thought, we have gotten this golf cart, and then I'm getting into I'm starting a little business where I'm selling trees like this, trees, and so I'm gonna be buying trees, and I'm gonna probably be lining them trees up down this driveway here, you know, for people. I don't want them in my whole backyard. When they come here, they can come in through the gate right here, and I can have all through here have my trees. So I have trees like these are the Santa Rosa plum tree, and they're self-pollinator. Let's say partial self. Okay, they're gonna produce plums, and but if you had 2 of them, it would produce even more. But you can get by with 1. You know, depending on size of your family, you might want 2 of them. But they are self-pollinator. I have a Scarlet Beauty, which is a self-pollinator, and I have a Methane, I think that's what they call it, one right here, which is a partial self-pollinator. But I've never had any luck with it yet, but I'm hoping that this year will be. You know, we had some freezes that kind of stopped it from growing, but it's taken off this year. It's doing really well, and I need to get in here and trim it. I'll trim it this fall. And so anyway, raised beds versus elevated beds, and I recommend that you give the elevated bed a shot. Make it a little small one. You could start with 1, maybe make it an herb garden and do it right outside your kitchen door or something. Make it a raised bed and put some herbs in it. I have an herb garden in the back right now. I got basil, rosemary, thyme. I got some chives, and well, I had parsley, but parsley just died out. It's too hot, and but that's in my little bed in the back there. On side the greenhouse, there's a bed. It's a smaller one, and okay. I just recommend you try the elevated beds. Give it a shot. If you have elevated beds and something I didn't mention that you're experiencing, good or bad, comment below. Let me know, so I know what to look for, and maybe I might have an answer. I'm sorry, maybe have an answer to help you with your problem that you're having with it, if you're having any problems. So, all right, you guys, I'm gonna call it a day. I'm gonna sign off for today. Got a lot going on today. So my strawberry wall is looking good. It's doing its job as far as shading, It looks like the strawberries are going to make it, okay, because it's been 4 days and they're not dead. And the elevated beds, you guys, give it a shot, try it out. Now, I know mine kind of look a little like things are dying, but I've been having onions planted in it, and that's what you're seeing. It's all keeled over and it's dying. It's about ready to harvest the onions, um, and I'm gonna be doing that probably this week. So, all right, you guys, thanks for spending the morning with me today. It's a Sunday morning. Um, it's gonna be a hot one. I can feel it already. I'm sweating already. A lot of humidity here in Louisiana. Um, Give the elevated beds a shot. I think you would be happy with it, especially as you get older. Or you could take your raised beds and start even building those up higher for yourself. Because the higher you do a raised bed, you're going to start experiencing the same thing as an elevated bed, because you're going to be high enough off of the ground that your tomatoes won't be splitting on you, and your peppers won't be dying off because they got too much water. So, all right, guys. Y'all guys be blessed. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.